by the way, a Freescale part on the inside. Excellent device, single-purpose device, does one thing extremely well. About 30 minutes into this, I heard that familiar beep of a text message, and my iPhone, which of course is turned off so it won't ring while I'm up here and interrupt me, had actually a Facebook status response from something I put last night because people were getting off work back in the States, starting to think about what they were going to do. And so I got up and I responded to that, and then I started thinking, you know what, I really need to be thinking about this presentation I'm doing later on. And so I got on there it is. I got on my MacBook, my 13-inch MacBook, which is a great little product, and started reviewing my PowerPoint presentation, not to do any work on it, but just to really think about what I was going to say today. And I started thinking about all those things I was doing. The truth is, one device, actually about, let's call it yay big, I could have done all of those activities on it. It probably would have been a little bit better experience than moving across the hotel room at 90 miles an hour at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it really got me thinking more about the task that is in front of this group, which is innovating in new product creation, really developing whole new categories to take advantage of the set of unmet needs that are out there in the user population that Ivanka spoke about earlier. And so that's really what my talk is mostly about today. How do we look at new category creation? How do we think about the confluence of new societal trends, new technologies, new channels, and new capabilities, and what we're capable of as a market community to go tap into that sweet spot that Ivanka talked about earlier, and in particular about the retail channels in a handful of regions. China, North America, and Western Europe we'll talk about in the course of this presentation, and what's happening in the PC world that sits somewhat adjacent to what we're talking about, but is definitely going to influence how these products are going to be accepted and embraced, and ultimately given an opportunity to get in front of consumers out there in the real world. So I'll give a quick high-level summary. I'll talk about a framework for thinking about new category creation and growth. I'll talk about Smartbooks in the context of new category creation, and then I'll talk about retail in a couple of different regions and what the considerations are. And at the end, give a call to action. I think a set of things that we can all do to try to enable real revenue growth and real opportunity in some territories that today don't have a great deal of competition, but definitely have a great deal of opportunity. So at a real high level, I hate lots and lots of words on a slide, and I realize that there's a language barrier thrown in as well, but I do want to talk about what you're gonna see. I'm gonna tell you about some social and technological and channel trends that are leading to an explosion of new category creation in price points under $300. I'm going to talk to you about some regional differences in both the channels and the users, and how that might drive how products are designed and positioned in those different regions. I'm going to suggest that OEMs, ODMs, and retailers have some things that they need to do to take advantage of these opportunities. I'm going to talk about the PC business throughout the presentation because I've happened to have spent 25 years in that space, and there are, by the way, it's paid for my house, it's paid for my kids' college, it's done a lot of things, but it is not the world's most healthy business. It is not the easiest place to make money, and there are some things that can be done as we're creating new markets and new opportunities to make those more profitable, more exciting places for component suppliers, for ODMs, for OEMs, and for retail channel participants to make money. And then finally, throughout the conversation, I'll talk about Smartbooks and the fact that I think that the more they look like this Amazon Kindle or things that are far, far removed from the clamshell notebook of today, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to see some of the opportunities that are out there, because it is going to move us into a new mind space for consumers where they can start to not walk in with preconceived expectations about what they're going to be delivered based on the form factor, but more about responding to the actual product as positioned and what it can do for them. So this may look somewhat familiar to the chart that Ivanka had. It's actually two of the circles are almost identical. This is actually from a Harvard Business Review article in 2006, written by a set of consultants who focus on growth and leadership with companies. And they built a model that is designed to help companies think about where do they find their new growth. Well, it turns out companies, industries, market communities look at all a very similar set of variables, and I want to apply this, in this case, to this Smartbook market community and talk about how do we look for growth? How do we evaluate the opportunities that are out there? It starts up in the upper left-hand corner with what trends might be enabling a market to grow faster. This is where new or converging technologies or major societal trends would show up. We'll talk about what's happening in the areas of social networking and technology that definitely reside in this portion of the chart. Up in the upper right, there you're always looking for some underlying consumer need, one that is either completely unmet, seriously underserved by the products that are out there, or comes with a set of overserved features and capabilities that obscure the value that's being delivered and provide an opportunity for focus. And then finally, you want to look at the capabilities of any organization or any ecosystem to actually deal with that intersection. And so if you look at the intersection of the societal and technological trends with what unmet needs exist, you have this large domain of opportunity, but that can only be realized if you put together the set of capabilities that are required to actually go deliver against those needs and take advantage of those emerging trends. And so we'll come back to this model later when we talk about the Smartbook community, but I wanted to put it in everyone's mind. Next, I wanted to talk about category creation in general and how to think about where the opportunity really lies. So, if life could fit in a 2x2 grid, I would be a pretty happy guy because it'd be simple, but it's not always quite that easy. But in general, if we can reduce things down to a framework, it's easier for me to think about it. And so the two dimensions I like to think about in category creation are how new and the degree to which a particular end user need is not being met today. That would be the bottom axis. And the proximity that the category is to an existing product category. That would be the vertical axis. And so netbooks sit squarely in the bottom left-hand corner, all the way back into the bottom left-hand corner. They are a computing product that offers mobility at a different price point and a slightly different size than the notebook products of today. Netbooks based on the Intel Atom processor and the Wintel architecture have a cost structure that's only slightly different. Still have not addressed many of the instant on and all-day use needs that are out there, but they're new and different, and they've clearly captured a great deal of attention. As you move up and to the right, you start to get into categories, new categories that would be more distinctive and addressing a broader set of unmet needs than categories that are out on the market today. My simple framework starts with something like the netbook, or to get outside the PC and Smartbook world, HD Pocket camcorders fit into this space where these little flip video camcorders that you've seen at $100 can deliver HD video in a very compact and portable way. It's not going to have the best lens on the planet, but it's going to deliver a really good quality at an incredible price point with awesome portability. To actually create a real new category in this extend space, you're probably going to have to dial back on serving some other need. In this case, they dial back on the quality of the lenses and the flexibility of the overall platform in favor of massive portability and good enough quality for the functionality. Moving up and to the right, you have categories like, say, the all-in-one printer. Printers and scanners were moving down in price. The integration of printers, scanners, and fax into a single product allowed all those different manufacturers to maintain price points that would have been otherwise impossible to maintain. And so this notion of integrating functionality, in a lot of ways, a smartphone and a Smartbook at their core are the integration of mobile phone technology with computing technology. And so a lot of what we're talking about might land in this zone. Specialized my friend the Kindle, the Amazon Kindle over here is a good example of that. But again, moving completely outside technology, something like a BMX or a Freescale bike, these little tiny bikes that people use like skateboards to do acrobatic things, you're never going to ride those like a touring bike. They have so overserved a set of needs on mobility and flexibility and doing stunts that many of the primary usage models of a bicycle are just completely no longer appropriate to use on that product. But, and Ivanka and I were having this conversation earlier today, there are a little over 6 billion of us on the planet. There are lots and lots and lots of 50 million unit opportunities that are relatively segmented, and hundreds of 5 to 10 million unit opportunities on this planet for relatively specialized products. So as we think about category creation, don't just think about finding a way to get next to that very lucrative and high volume PC market. Think about finding unmet user needs and even more specialized, not just on function, but also age group is another area where specializing can really come into play. And then finally, truly inventing a new category is hard to do. I could argue that the PC was a new category. That was back in 77 or 81, depending on who you want to give credit. But the one that's, I think, very relevant to this conversation is the portable radio. The portable transistor radio in 1954, first time somebody could carry entertainment with them. Fundamentally new, a set of unmet, no one was clamoring to get a portable radio. That wasn't something that market research would have told you. But people liked their music, and they were out and about more and more, and at that period of time with more discretionary spending money and with more time on their hands than had ever been the case. But this upper right-hand corner isn't going to happen as often as the others, but we need to think about it. So with that as a background, I'm going to get into Smartbooks themselves. So what's happening in this area of enablers? Well, first, web-based video proliferation is happening everywhere. User-generated content, people taking and posting videos of themselves, taking clips from movies that they like, remixing them, adding their own soundtracks, carrying flip video HD camcorders with them wherever they go, and sharing the results. In non-Windows or Mac-based environments, one of the killer challenges that has been brought up multiple times as I've talked about this space with people is you're never going to be able to get an iTunes application on Linux. Well, you know what? It just doesn't matter anymore. iTunes is DRM free. You can buy a song on your iTunes, on your PC, put it on any other device, and it'll work just fine. As a matter of fact, I've got a service called Dropbox that when I buy a piece of music on my MacBook, it immediately syncs to my Windows PC and my Ubuntu-based netbook, all through the cloud and all seamlessly. The other things happening is, as we talked about in a number of these sessions, social networking proliferation. People are staying more and more in touch with one another. Wi-Fi is everywhere, 3G almost everywhere, and there's even new products being introduced in the home networking space that are assuming that people are coming into your house that want to get access to your network. So the latest Apple Wi-Fi router has a guest mode. And the guest mode provides essentially a second network in your home that gives access to the internet, but no access to the rest of your PCs. I've talked to some folks at some of the other networking companies, and they're all looking at providing similar sets of capabilities. And so the notion of being able to go to your neighbor's home, to go to the coffee shop, to go to your school, to go to your place of work, to go to most any public space and have access via Wi-Fi almost certainly, and if not through a 3G-based data plan, is becoming much more realistic. Cloud-based services, I talked about Dropbox. There are other ones out there. Being able to get your data wherever you happen to be without it necessarily always needing to be resident on your device or maintaining synchronization between multiple devices is getting easier and easier and more affordable. And Henri talked about the App Store at Apple and its success, but the economies that are being created around these small micropayments, being able to pay $2 or $5 and get some application that does one thing really, really well, is changing the way people think about how they use their devices. I know my wife happens to use the timer on her iPhone as often almost as she uses the telephone. She's timing how long the sprinklers are on, because we're in the worst drought in recorded history in Austin, Texas right now. She's timing how long until she has to stop doing the Pilates or whatever the next thing is that she has to do. Not the most exciting application in the world, happens to have come free with the iPhone. But there are more and more of these every single day that are becoming integral to people's lives, and it's no longer an $80, $100, or a $700 purchase price to get access to an application. So as we think about the unmet needs that we're trying to tap into in this space, you've heard them in the definition of Smartbook coming from Henri and others. True all-day use, instant on, persistent connectivity. I'd add another, spontaneous purchase price points. The ability to not think about, do I buy this device today or not? And this is one of the reasons why I'm attracted to the Wi-Fi into the spectrum in the short term. The ability to put a $200 product that's really a $200 product into the market is exciting. The other thing that happens when you hit those spontaneous price points is the ability to drive further segmentation by usage model and by age. And finally, I think that these devices need to enable at least one usage model radically better than a PC or a smartphone. You've got to be able to do something with one of these devices that says, I'm going to carry it at the exclusion of one of these other devices. Not the complete exclusion, but I'm going to incorporate it into my existence, as Ivanka was talking about. I'm going to let this device into my life. And then finally, what are the capabilities? Well, with the latest ARM Cortex-A8 and the roadmap that they're delivering, you've got performance that meets where the trailing edge of PCs are, and that's good enough. It's good enough for the vast majority of applications. By the way, it's not quite good enough for video, but with the application processor model, the ability to do a system on a chip and get dedicated silicon for video decode and video encode, you can solve the entertainment use need as well. You've got these devices are coming from the mobile phone world, so power management's at their center. You've got credible operating system options are emerging. You've got Ubuntu and that entire community working to build a stable, usable, understandable version of Linux. You do have Google with Chrome OS that is right now mostly on well, it's not even on paper because they're very digital, but it's on presentations out on the web. But it's got a brand associated with it that is getting people to start thinking about viable options in this space. You have browser-based application models. Microsoft has even announced that when they bring out Office 2010, next year they'll bring out a version that will be available for free on the web that'll have functionality very similar to the functionality of today's Office applications. Talked about hardware-accelerated HD video decode and encode, the e-paper technologies that are appearing in ebooks and other screen technologies to drive new usage models. All this getting to a price potential that is lower than any traditional computing device that has been out there up until now. So what is a Smartbook? It's that same list that you've seen all day, adding my two spontaneous purchase price points, increasing segmentation, I guess there's three, and enabling at least one usage model that is fundamentally better than either a PC or a smartphone. So I took a stab at identifying some Smartbook subcategories and why they might be relevant. You may notice that I don't have, in the far right-hand column, I'm saying which new category type. This is from my framework. I don't have one that's in the invent category. If I did, I'd probably be working on that to the exclusion of speaking at a conference today, because those tend to be the biggest opportunities. But I'm still working on it, and that's what we all need to be thinking about. But let's talk through some of the ones that are more incremental. So the ebook I put in the Smartbook category in general. The target usage is reading. The advantages versus a PC is all-day use. It's instant on. It's ultra thin. It has great daylight legibility. Advantage versus a smartphone is it's got a larger screen. It's more readable. The ergonomics. This is a specialized product, and it's one that does one thing really, really well. The vast majority of devices we'll see will probably fit into this mobile companion bucket. It's mobile entertainment and connectivity. Its advantage versus PC is cost, all-day use, instant on, all the things that we think about SmartBooks. This is really the category that's going to be closest to the existing netbook space, and it's the one where we're most likely to see the turf battles that Henri talked about. But it's going to have large volume potential, and if it delivers upon mobility and all-day use, and if it delivers on design and functionality, beauty, as Ivanka talked about earlier today, it can be truly successful. The home media phone, I won't go through the remainder of these, other than at a real high level. Home media phones, not a mobile device, but using the same underlying technology. Home media controllers would be something that would be more of a mobile device that could provide both 1 foot, in your hand versus 10-foot control of electronic devices in the home. More youth-targeted devices that were more Wi-Fi centric, that don't require a $1,000 2-year commitment on a service contract to get good connectivity. So all of these have the potential to be unique subcategories that have tremendous volume in their own individual rights. So let's talk about retail. Backing up a little bit to Intel and their original thinking around the netbook, they actually had it right. They were targeting this device as a companion device, not as a new opening price point. In certain markets, China is one of them, where they have very low household penetration rates of PCs. It was an unrealistic objective on their part, because it is good enough computing, and netbooks did provide a great opening price point in this market, and so they completely missed the boat on that, and they chose not to deliver the right set of marketing to go along with that positioning in the more mature markets with higher penetration rates, and so they had a hard time delivering upon it. But beyond that, if these are going to be companion devices, they need to be entertainment devices. And the processor and the chipset just really didn't hit the mark on entertainment. The video capabilities in a SmartBook-based, whether it's on Qualcomm Snapdragon, the Freescale IMX51, these products are going to have a better video experience, because they're going to have dedicated video decode. And they're going to do it at lower power and better, slimmer form factors. Intel also, along with Microsoft, not directly with rules, but with a lot of policies and guidelines, tried to control what did a netbook look like. It had to be a screen this small. It had to have a hard drive only this big. It had to have all of these things. And I apologize for the U.S. metaphor. Keeping the puppies in the basket. Think about 8 little puppies and trying to keep them under control. Eventually, they're going to find out where they want to go. Well, that's what has happened with the OEM community. Is they're going to go make products that they think their customers need, and to expect them to stay within a 9-inch or a 10-inch screen or a certain size hard drive is just unrealistic, and that's certainly happening in this space. The retailers, what is the first thing they did when they got their first netbook at $349? They put it just immediately to the left of the $499 notebook PC. And all that said is, I am the thing that is cheaper than the thing to my right. What they're starting to do today, by the way, is they're putting all the netbooks over here and they're putting all the notebooks over here, so that people start to look at them differently, but they didn't really hit the mark on merchandising early on. And then, as we've talked about a lot today, this clamshell form factor, this I look like a notebook, expect to see windows inside of me form factor, has set expectations before people even got any experience with the device of what they were going to see. It made it harder for Linux operating systems and for new application models and for new approaches to be delivered. So the netbook is 2 years old. I call it the terrible twos, another unfortunate U.S. metaphor. Our kids, when they get about 2 years old, they start to get a little rambunctious. And that's what's happening in the netbook market right now. But that creates some opportunity in the SmartBook space. So, talked about most of this already. That familiarity of a netbook to the old notebook model breeds some expectations. Let's change that. Freescale and Qualcomm and others are looking at new category explorations. They're out there doing the same kind of design research that Canonical is doing. They're going into people's homes. They're doing industrial designs and putting plastic models in front of people and pictures and hand drawings to get people to say, I might consider embracing that. And that kind of activity has to move beyond a handful of the industry players, but to this entire market community in order to try to drive the kind of opportunities that exist when you create new and profitable categories for growth. The last thing I'll talk about on this page is the margins in the PC business. The margins in the PC business are lousy. And they're lousy. They've been lousy for a long time. And the way it used to work, when I would go in and talk to a retailer, it'd be something like this. I understand that your margins are lousy on my product, but think of all the other stuff you get to sell when you sell PCs in your stores. High margin cables, high margin monitors, high margin this, high margin that. You have a whole shopping basket full of goods that you get to sell because you're selling my PC, so don't worry about how little you're making on my product. By the way, the PC manufacturers aren't making that much money either. But the sad truth is the accessory shopping basket for PCs and for the types of devices we're talking about, they're not as good as they used to be. And so the opportunity for the Smartbook category is to think about creating a healthy standalone category, one that takes some of the cost savings relative to the PC world and puts them back into margin for the people in the ecosystem, including the retailers, so that they will get behind it. If this becomes another PC, another 8 points of margin product for a retailer, it's not going to be something that they're going to get too excited about, and we're not going to get the innovation in the marketing into this to take advantage of the innovation on the technological side that the people in this room are trying to deliver. So I'm far from an expert in China retail, but I've got buddies, and I call, and I've been coming here for quite some time. But there are a few things that I know. There's still a lot of first-time buyers in the China market. Netbooks, as a result, have been primarily an opening price point play. Desktops in the tier 4, 5, and 6 cities are still the dominant flavor of purchases here, and as you saw in some of the prior data, they're still the dominant form factor across the region in total. And this is a little bit more anecdotal. All-in-ones are starting to come up, but they tend to be real desktop specification all-in-ones rather than entry-level opening price points. So they're more design-centric, experienced user types of all-in-ones. We've skipped Vista altogether. It's still largely an XP market. Some of that is because of the price point possible with XP. But very interesting and having a real impact on what should happen in China is the fact that big box retailers, and by big box retailers I mean consumer electronics stores with multiple categories, like similar to a Best Buy in the States or a Dixon's in Europe. These retailers that have huge assortments are a relatively small percentage of the PC marketplace, with company-owned stores and franchise stores and the PC malls being the bulk of the volume. And that has an impact on whether or not people are going to go to a particular destination to find something new and completely different. And we'll talk about that coming up. We'll spend a little bit of time on U.S. retail. Best Buy is the last of the full-line retailers left. They're starting to get it right on positioning netbooks as a companion device. But returns are still 2 times on a netbook what they are for a notebook. So instead of 7% of the product coming back for a notebook, maybe 14, 15, 16% coming back on a netbook. The early Linux plays weren't viewed positively. I think that's in part because the early netbooks had other issues. But Linux itself did not, kind of got the bad reputation within these retailers. Not all formats embrace all new categories. So some stores, their customers aren't expecting to see brand new technologies in there. They're expecting to see things that they understand and that they can make the decision on their own. Battery life battery life marketing claims are going nuts in the States. They come up with 7 or 8 or 9 disclaimers about how they manage to get the battery life measure. It's as if the automakers started saying that the driver needs to weigh only 80 pounds and you need to be going downhill with a tailwind, and that's how we get our gas mileage estimates. And that's part of what's happening. They're using mobile mark. It's an industry standard, but it's an industry standard that essentially runs at idle, and it's starting to get some negative press. Data plans are really expensive in the US, and so 3G-based solutions for these devices make it, if you think about a 2-year commitment, it's a $1,000 commitment. Europe market is a little ahead of North America on netbook adoption, but the growth is decelerating somewhat. The 3G plans are being subsidized very aggressively for netbooks. You can buy a netbook for €1 if you do a 3-year commitment. They're a little bit more flexible in Europe with data plans and how they work across multiple devices. So in Europe, at least in Germany, where I was talking to a buddy the other day, you can use your iPhone data plan. They'll give you an extra SIM card for a USB stick for your notebook. Same data plan, no additional cost. Not even close to being able to do that in the States, but it makes 3G a little bit more desirable in Europe right now than Wi-Fi is. And they had a similar experience with the early Linux-based netbooks that make them nervous, but still anxious to continue to experiment. Skip this. I reduced it all down to a couple of guidelines. Really ended up with 2 different major categories of models to attempt in working with retail. In North America, Europe, and in the big box retail portion of China, focusing on more specialized products or products that integrate multiple functionality, getting away from the clamshell design, really positioning these devices as smart mobile gadgets with OEM margins that are similar to what the OEMs make today, but with retailer gross margins that are as much as twice what the retailers are making on notebooks today, and merchandising in a completely independent area versus PCs is, I think, the right way to go, because it's going to allow these opportunities, these new categories, to stand on their own. Whereas in these captive company-owned and franchise stores, there's still a very large opening price point market in China and India and other less mature markets. And clamshell devices with these new operating systems that are becoming more and more robust all the time to support these new opening price points is still a viable model. But there's going to be more contention with the Wintel world in those areas, but there's still definitely an opportunity. So my final thoughts are, new category creation is difficult, but it's worth it. Smartbooks have a real opportunity for creating new growth opportunities for OEMs and ODMs. They can help retailers drive their top line, but it's going to take doing things a little bit differently. First, get some products to market. We're going to have to experiment. We need some successes and we need some failures to learn from. But as I said earlier, there are 6 billion people on the planet. It's not that hard to design a product in this space. It costs a couple $100,000 in engineering to get a product to market, to drive a reasonable market test with real human beings, and possibly make some money in the progress. We need to, I think, move beyond the clamshell in the second generation designs. We need to experiment with increasingly segmented offerings, more offerings targeted at the youth market, where this $200 price point is going to start making these devices much more approachable. And while I didn't talk about this last one in a lot of detail elsewhere in the presentation, in markets where these types of approaches are commercially acceptable and legal, OEMs have the ability to tie their guidelines on minimum advertised price with their marketing programs and have an influence on where products are priced in retail. They need to do what they can to help protect the gross margin for the retailers, because the retailers need to be excited and motivated to sell these products. And if it's a race to the bottom, If it's a race to whoever can deliver the lowest price, that's not going to create the incentive for the kind of variety and innovation that we need, because for every category that succeeds over the next few years, there will be at least one that fails, and that's a good thing. That's something that's going to ultimately drive a lot of opportunity for everyone in this room, but it's not going to happen if all of us are looking at how to pull all of the profitability out of everyone else in the value chain. So that is essentially it. And I know I have a tendency to speak relatively quickly, and so if I glossed over anything, I'd be happy to stay afterwards and chat with anybody about this, but I really appreciate the opportunity presented by Freescale to come and talk. And I appreciate the attention today, and I wish you all the luck in the world in all of your category creation efforts in the Smartbook space. Thank you.